I'll look to the clerk here.
Ready?
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Encinitas City Council on Wednesday, May 27th, 4 p.m. And we have one item tonight on this special meeting, and it is the presentation of the draft updated climate action plan and cost analysis. And the contact person is Sustainability Manager Najera.
And real quickly, I'll just call roll for the record. Councilmember Lyons.
Here.
Councilmember San Antonio.
Present. Myself.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Hara.
Present.
Mayor Ehlers.
Here.
Record will show all members of the council are present tonight.
Okay, and we'll start with staff report.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Ehlers and Council, for having us here to present the draft updated climate action plan and cost analysis. As a reminder, your recommended action tonight is to review the draft documents and then provide any input or direction to staff. A few brief introductions before we get too far along. So again, I'm Crystal Nahara. I'm the Sustainability Manager for the city. And we also have here for city staff, Ryan Lampkin. He's our Sustainability Analyst. And then Scott Dropkin, the Development Services Director. And we've also got our consultants that supported the CAP update and the cost analysis from the Energy Policy Initiative Center. And that's Scott Anders, Executive Director, who's sitting here at the table. And then behind us is Yichao Gu, Senior Policy Analyst. And then Xiaodan Chen, who's the Technical Policy Analyst for EPIC. So I wanted to start off tonight by just level setting and kind of answer the question for Council and anyone in the audience, what is a climate action plan? So a climate action plan is a comprehensive blueprint for addressing climate change through goals and measures that aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while also managing future climate vulnerabilities and adaptation. And so the city does have an existing climate action plan. The latest version was adopted by council in 2020. And why are we here to update the climate action plan now? So there's a few reasons for that, so I wanted to go over those. The first reason being was within the current plan, there's actually a defined process for implementation and monitoring and updates, and it actually identifies within the existing plan that it recommends that council should update the plan every 5 years. And the reason being is to stay current with state and federal laws and guidelines that have potentially changed since 2020. And there have been a number of changes in those laws and guidelines, and so that's one reason for updating the CAP. There's also new greenhouse gas reduction measures that can become available within a 5-year time frame. So those are things like new technology, new innovations that can help drive down emissions, like better technology in vehicles, better technology and appliances that help reduce emissions. And then lastly, in the city's council's FY26 work plan, there was also a project in there to update the climate action plan and complete a benefit cost analysis in association with the CAP. So that is why we're here tonight. So this presentation will go through the 5-step process of what it takes to update a climate action plan and make sure that that each step of the process is understood. And so we'll start with step 1, which is to conduct a baseline greenhouse gas assessment. So that's also typically called a greenhouse gas inventory. So the first step was to update that inventory for the city. Step 2 is to establish greenhouse gas reduction targets. So how much do you want to reduce those emissions within the city? Step 3 is to develop greenhouse gas reduction strategies, goals, and measures by which you would use to actually reduce those emissions to try to achieve those targets. Step 4 is to identify climate vulnerabilities and adaptation strategies that the city would utilize in the future when potential climate change impacts are being observed and impacting the city. And then step 5 is to, once the plan is adopted, to implement the plan and then monitor progress towards reducing emissions. And so this slide shows a summary of the chapters that make up the climate action plan. And this is the same outline as the current climate action plan. So not much has changed here. We did flip the order of two of the chapters, but that was about it. So the first chapter is the introduction. Second chapter goes through greenhouse gas emissions inventory, forecast, and targets. And then chapter 3, I would arguably say is probably the most important chapter. That's where the strategies, goals, and measures are outlined. And the measures are the items that the city would implement to actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then chapter 4 goes over climate adaptation. Chapter 5 covers implementation and monitoring, and then lastly, references and appendices. So one of the primary unit that is used to measure greenhouse gas emissions is metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That is a mouthful and a lot to understand, so I wanted to make sure it is understood what that metric means as we move forward in the discussion of the climate action plan. So the equivalent term, that is within the unit to explain the differences in global warming potential of the various greenhouse gas emissions. And so carbon dioxide is kind of the set point, and then all the other greenhouse gases are compared to carbon dioxide in terms of their potential to warm the planet. And so methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide in the table is about 300 times more potent. And so the equivalency metric essentially sets these to be, to have an equivalent unit to be able to compare them all using one unit. And so as an example, I'll give you a few examples here of what 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equals. And so driving 2,500 miles in a gas-powered vehicle is roughly equivalent to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. 1 acre of mature forest sequestering carbon for 1 year is also roughly equivalent to 1 MTCO2e. And then lastly, 1 home's energy use for 8 years is also roughly equivalent to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. So now I'll dive into step 1, which is to conduct that baseline greenhouse gas assessment. So this pie chart shows the greenhouse gas inventory for the city of Encinitas for the year 2016. That was the most current data year that we were able to utilize to identify what the city's emissions are community-wide. And so community-wide in 2016, the city had a total of 381,000 metric tons that were emitted. And these emissions came 58% from on-road transportation, 21% from electricity, so that's the electricity that's being used in the buildings within the city, 15% from natural gas sources, and then the remainder from off-road transportation, solid waste, off-road transportation, water, and wastewater. The next step in the process is to identify your emissions forecast. So what is going to happen to the emissions over time, looking out into the future, or what do we expect to happen? And then how much does the city want to reduce those emissions by? What are the targets going to be? And so this chart shows the forecast between 2020 and 2050 of what we expect our emissions to be and how they might be reduced based on various state and federal and local policy. And so if you look at the green dashed line at the top of the chart, that is what we call the business as usual emissions. So if there were no federal, state, or local regulations, this is what we would anticipate emissions to be over time out to 2050. So you can see it roughly stays about the same at around just under that 400,000 mark over time to 2050. But as certain federal and state regulations are implemented over time, we do see a gradual reduction. So that blue wedge that you see represents the federal and California vehicle efficiency standards. And so those are regulations that are tied to vehicle exhaust. And so over time, as those regulations are in place and people purchase new vehicles, it's expected that emissions will be reduced based on those purchases. And then the red wedge references California's Renewable and Energy Efficiency Program regulations. So this relates to utility scale renewable energy and how much that would reduce emissions by converting from the current percentage of renewable energy to eventually 100% renewable energy on the grid. And then the remaining emissions are in the gray, and that's where the city would have an opportunity to reduce emissions over time by enacting additional policies, programs, and projects that would, in effect, reduce emissions. And so what is being proposed in this updated climate action plan are 2 new greenhouse gas reduction targets. That's a target for the year 2030 to get 40% below 2016, the 2016 inventory emissions by that 2030 date. And then also the second target is to reduce emissions by 85% below 2016 emissions by 2045. And so I want to point out that these set targets are in alignment with state regulations and guidelines. And those are SB 32, AB 1279, and the California Air Resources Board scoping plan. And so for consistency, that's why those 2 targets were set. And the rest of the presentation will cover how we can achieve those targets through a set of emissions that are being proposed in the climate action plan. So step 3 is to develop greenhouse gas reduction strategies, goals, and measures. So how are we actually going to achieve the targets that are being proposed? And so before we get into those actual measures, I wanted to cover how we got to that set of measures. So first and foremost, I wanted to share that there was extensive public engagement that went into the development of the 2026 CAP update. So 3 public workshops over the few years that that the CAP update has been in process, 8 stakeholder interviews, there was an online survey, and multiple public comment periods depending on the different, with the different versions, the drafts that were available to the public to comment on. And then multiple times, 7 times, we went to visit commissions to get feedback from city commissions as well. So that included the Environmental Commission, but also Planning Commission, Youth Commission, Senior Commission, Traffic and Public Safety Commission, nearly all the commissions we visited. So in summary, the greenhouse gas reduction strategies are as shown on the slide. The strategies have not changed significantly from the prior CAP. They're roughly the same categories with a few new naming conventions. So strategy 1 is related to building decarbonization. Strategy 2 is renewable energy. 3 is water efficiency. 4 is clean and efficient transportation. 5 is zero emission equipment. 6 is zero waste. And 7 is carbon sequestration. And then within those 7 strategies are housed the 32 measures that make up the climate action plan. Before we get into the measures that were selected to be put in the CAP based on their ability to reduce emissions, I did want to share some of the measures that were evaluated but were ultimately excluded from the list of measures for various reasons, just to kind of share some of the analysis and considerations that went into the measures that did end up in the final proposed climate action plan. So I won't go over all of these, but I'll just share a couple of them. One example is we considered the implementation of blue carbon projects. That's row 3 in this table. Blue carbon projects are things that projects that you can implement in lagoons or the ocean that can actually sequester carbon. That's things like planting eelgrass and having eelgrass sequester carbon and bring it into the sediment of the lagoon. Ultimately, that is an example of one that we didn't feel comfortable putting in the climate action plan because the city doesn't actually have jurisdiction over the lagoons. So while it is a great project, it's not something that the city would necessarily have control over the implementation of that project. So we ended up putting this measure in the climate action plan as a supporting measure and not one of the core numeric greenhouse gas reduction measures. So We would, of course, staff could, of course, support other jurisdictions, the county and the other agencies that manage the lagoons in such a project, and to the extent that we can, but we wouldn't be able to be the lead on that project and claim the greenhouse gas reductions. So again, I won't go over all these, but just wanted to make sure that that was understood, that there were some that were excluded. Okay, and then I'm going to pass it over to Ryan. He is going to go over each of the measures so that you can get an understanding of what measures are being proposed in the CAP and how they would reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ryan Lampkin. I'll be going over the proposed greenhouse gas reduction strategies and measures, starting with Strategy 1, building decarbonization, which seeks to increase energy efficiency and reduce natural gas consumption in buildings in Encinitas. So before I go through the greenhouse gas reduction measures in the building decarbonization strategy, I wanted to walk you all through this table that you'll be seeing in each of the strategies. This closely follows the tables that are in the Climate Action Plan in Chapter 3. So starting with the first column, this is the measure number and title, and then the description is a description of that measure and what it would do. The 2030 and 2045 performance metrics are the greenhouse gas reduction potential if that measure is implemented. And then the revisions column refers to whether this measure was in the 2018 CAP as an existing measure, if it was revised, that being expanded or altered in some way from the 2018 CAP, and then new being an entirely new measure proposed for the 2026 CAP update. And lastly is the cost effectiveness column, and this is the direct results of the benefit cost analysis that was conducted for the CAP update. And Scott will be going over that later in the presentation a bit more about how to interpret these results, but I will share as we're going through this, this is dollars per metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent reduced. And anything in black is actually a net positive. It saves the participant money, and red is a cost, which most measures are going to be a cost. And so measures BD1 through BD4 are all existing measures in the 2018 CAP, and these all relate to REACH code measures that require additions and alterations or new construction buildings to be more energy efficient and incentivize them to be all electric where applicable. Measure BD5 is a newly proposed measure, and this seeks to decarbonize existing buildings in the city. Decarbonizing buildings refers to transitioning natural gas appliances to all electric, and that would be done through developing and implementing a suite of studies, programs, regulations, and incentives. And I'll note that this measure has the highest emission reduction potential in 2045 of any of the measures in the Climate Action Plan update. Measure MBD1 was revised from the 2018 CAP. This measure calls for implementing energy efficiency as well as decarbonization or electrification projects at the city's existing municipal facilities. Measure MBD2 is a new measure, and this would require that any newly constructed city facilities be designed and constructed as all electric. Strategy 2, renewable energy, seeks to increase renewable electricity consumption in Encinitas. Measure RE1 is an existing measure, and this aims to maintain the city's membership in San Diego Community Power, who supplies utility customers with renewable electricity at rates often higher than SDG&E, and for most Encinitas customers, it is a 100% renewable electricity rate. Measure RE2 is existing as well, and this is another REACH code measure, and this would require that substantial remodels to non-residential buildings to install solar PV systems. Measure RE1 was in the 2018 CAP and was revised. This measure calls for installing solar PV systems and battery energy storage systems at existing city facilities. And I'll note a couple things about this measure. It has no performance metric in 2030, as implementation isn't anticipated to begin until after 2030. And this measure is the most cost-effective of all of the measures in the Climate Action Plan update. Measure MRE2 is similar to Measure MBD2, and this would require that newly constructed municipal facilities be designed and constructed with solar and battery energy storage systems. And both MRE2 and MBD2 are not quantified, as the city doesn't have the specifics for the building square footage or energy use for any of the future planned facilities. So the greenhouse gas reduction potential for those two measures was not able to be quantified at this time. Moving on to strategy 3, water efficiency, which seeks to decrease potable water demand in the city. Measure WE1 is an existing measure, and this would support the local water districts' water conservation efforts, many of which are already underway and or required by state law. WE2 is a new measure to the Climate Action Plan, but this is actually an ordinance that the city has had adopted since 2015. And this is another REACH code measure that requires newly constructed single-family homes to be pre-plumbed for gray water systems. Measure MWE1 is a new measure that seeks to convert city-owned landscape in parks and a public right-of-way to drought-tolerant or native species. And I will note this is the least cost-effective measure in the Climate Action Plan update. That's largely due to the low greenhouse gas reduction potential of this measure. And as I'll note later in my presentation, this is where the council may want to consider some of the co-benefits that exist outside of the greenhouse gas reductions, as the cost effectiveness solely considers how effective that measure is at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. All right, strategy 4, excuse me for the typo, clean and efficient transportation, seeks to increase adoption of low carbon means of transportation in the city. Measure CET1 was revised from the 2018 CAP. Previously, this measure called for implementing the entire active transportation plan by 2030, which is a cost prohibitive action and not realistic with the city's current budgeting abilities. And so the new proposed performance metric for this measure, based on what the city is currently budgeting for bike and pedestrian projects and what the city has historically received, what grants the city has historically received for those same projects, staff determined that by 2045, the entire modal alternatives project would be able to be implemented, which is about 45% of ATP projects. And this measure also calls for incorporating any future updates made to the ATP or MAP that may be adopted by City Council at a later date. Measure CET2 seeks to implement a microtransit program, which would be a on-demand or local fixed route shuttle system in the city. And this is an existing measure in the 2018 CAP. Measure CET3 is a newly proposed measure, and this would require transportation demand management, or TDM programs, for large developments in the city. A TDM program is when a developer or a property owner incentivizes tenants or customers or employees to commute alternatively to their site. Measure CET4 seeks to see a citywide reduction in vehicle miles traveled by 2045 by developing and implementing a comprehensive set of studies, programs, regulations, and incentives as directed by the future circulation element update. And this measure does not have any performance metric for 2030, as implementation is anticipated to begin after 2030. Measure CET5 is an existing measure in the 2018 Climate Action Plan, and this seeks to improve traffic flow as to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with idling and traffic. And the CAP calls for traffic signal retiming and installing roundabouts to do so. Continuing on with the clean and efficient transportation strategy, measures CET6 and CET7 are both REACH code measures that call for electric vehicle charging stations to be installed at residential and non-residential construction projects. Measure MCET1 is an existing measure, and this is a state mandate that the city transition its fleet to zero-emission vehicles. MCET2 is expanded from the 2018 CAP, and this measure would implement a municipal employee transportation transportation demand management program, and incentivize city employees to commute alternatively. Measure MCET3 is a new measure, and this would seek to install public EV charging stations at the city's parking lots, in parks, or at the community and senior center, and would work to encourage non-residential property owners to voluntarily install EV charging stations.
Yeah.
Should I take a quick?
1 second.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries. All right. All right, so moving on to strategy 5, zero emission equipment. This strategy seeks to reduce emissions associated with gas-powered landscaping equipment. Measure ZE1 is an existing measure in the 2018 cap, and the ordinance has been in effect since 2020, and this limits the use of gas-powered leaf blowers in the city. And Measure ZE2 is a newly proposed measure, and this would limit the use of all gas-powered landscape equipment in the city. And this measure doesn't have a performance metric for 2030, as the ordinance wouldn't take effect until after 2030. Strategy 6, zero waste, aims to increase waste diversion throughout Encinitas. There are no newly proposed measures in the zero waste strategy, as Measure ZW1, Implement a Zero Waste Program, outlines several primary implementation actions that all account for the actions the city is already taking or may take to further reduce waste disposal and increase solid waste diversion. And lastly, Strategy 7, carbon sequestration, aims to increase the city's tree canopy coverage. Measure CS1 would establish a tree canopy goal for the city. So the 2030 performance metric here accounts for the city's existing tree canopy coverage and calculates what Encinitas' existing tree coverage is sequestering annually. And then the 2045 performance metric is based on a 5% increase of that, the tree canopy coverage. Measure CS2 is similar to the gray water measure. This is new to the climate action plan, but something the city has already had as a requirement for several years, and this is the city's landscape tree requirements for new developments. Measure CS3 would incentivize tree planting on private property through a free tree giveaway program. And Measure CS4 calls for adopting and implementing a mature tree ordinance. And this measure has no greenhouse gas reductions quantified, as it is the emission reductions are captured in Measure CS1. And lastly, this is an existing measure, and this is to continue to plant and maintain city-owned trees. So in addition to the quantified greenhouse gas reductions in each of the strategies, there are co-benefits and supporting actions identified. The co-benefits are what the city may expect to realize outside of greenhouse gas reductions by implementing the measures. And you could see in the graphic on the right for a tree that in the climate action plan, the tree would sequester carbon, and we calculate how much carbon is sequestered. But in addition to that, there is shade provided, there's cooling, urban greening and beautification, increased property values, and those are some of the co-benefits of planting trees. There are also supporting actions identified in each of the strategies, and these are actions that the city may take in addition to the quantified greenhouse gas reduction measures, but these measures are not quantified for a number of reasons. Some examples of supporting measures are partnerships and coordination with other agencies. This isn't quantified, as we can't rely on our emission reductions to be done by another agency. Public outreach and encouragement is another example of a supporting action, and research, monitoring, and tracking legislation, just to name a few. So to circle back to the greenhouse gas emissions forecast, this chart shows the forecast with climate action plan implementation. And what this graph is showing is that if all of the 7 strategies are fully implemented and the emission reduction potentials are fully realized, that the city would meet both the 2030 and 2045 targets that were set. Okay, so now I'll pass it back to Crystal.
Thank you, Ryan. And I wanted to quickly just touch on some CEQA considerations as it relates to the Climate Action Plan. CEQA is a little bit complicated here, so wanted to walk through it for you all. So the 2011 Climate Action Plan was the city's first CAP. It was considered a qualitative climate action plan without a CEQA document associated. And then the CAP was in the process of being updated around the time that the fifth cycle housing element update was in process and the environmental impact report for that element was being developed. And through that report, it was actually identified that there would be an environmental impact as a result of the greenhouse gas emissions that would be generated by the additional development and housing that was going to be built as a result of the housing element. And so because of that, mitigation measure GHG2 was established as part of that EIR, and that directed the city to adopt an updated climate action plan that was CEQA qualified. And so that was the planning document that required the updated CAP at that time to have a environmental analysis. So the 2018 CAP, after the analysis, it was determined that there was, we were able to adopt a negative declaration determining that the 2018 CAP was actually not a significant impact to the environment. And then subsequently, when there was a 2-year update that was required for the CAP as a result of the timing of the housing element adoption, the impacts of that 2020 CAP were similar to the 2018s in terms of it being less than significant. So we were able to adopt an addendum to the negative declaration at that time. So fast forward to current day, we currently have in front of you the draft 2026 CAP. So in the same fashion, since the greenhouse gas reduction targets that are being proposed in the draft 2026 CAP are in alignment with current state regulations and guidelines, that's what is used to to determine the environmental impacts in CEQA. And our targets do align with state regulation. And then also the measures that have been proposed in the 2026 CAP are enabling the city to meet those set targets. And so the combination of those two components are what able the city to adopt an addendum to the 2018 Climate Action Plan's negative declaration. So that is the current proposal when we bring back the draft CAP to actually be adopted by council, that we would be able, as long as there are no substantial changes directed to the CAP, we would be able to adopt the draft CAP as proposed, just with a simple addendum to the negative declaration CEQA document. And with that, I will pass it over to, actually, I think this is my slide. So step 4 of the climate action planning process is to identify climate vulnerabilities and adaptation strategies. So in this chapter is where essentially for this updated CAP, we were able to reference a recently completed assessment, the climate vulnerability assessment that was completed as part of the safety element update. This was approved and adopted by council in 2023. So rather than repeating new analysis, we relied on recently completed analysis to identify the future vulnerabilities that the city can expect to see over the next 20 years and beyond. And so that chapter not only covers the vulnerabilities, but then also references the different strategies that the city could employ in the future to mitigate some of those vulnerabilities that may be realized. Examples of those include sea level rise, increased erratic storms, greater wildfire risk in the future, things like that. And so I did want to share that there are some adaptation efforts that are already underway. For example, the city has currently a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan that it follows. Our water districts are actively encourage the community to conserve water in terms of potential future drought risk. We also have some physical projects that we implement along our shoreline to protect from high intense storms and to bolster the shoreline so that we can limit bluff erosion from those large storm impacts. So those include our Cardiff Living Shoreline and our largest sand replenishment project, which is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers San Diego County, California project is its official name. And the photos that are there are showing you an example of the Army Corps project that was installed a couple years ago, the before photo with the cobble at the coastline, and then the after photo with the buffering with the sand that was acquired from an offshore borrow site. So the last step in CAP planning is the implementation plan and monitoring the progress of your CAP implementation. So once the CAP is adopted, staff would work to actually implement the components of the climate action plan. There's several components to this. The first component is administration. This relates, what we mean by administration is it takes many hands to complete the implementation of a climate action plan. So many departments would be involved. There's measures that involve public works, infrastructure projects and facility projects. There's capital improvement projects that would be implemented by engineering. And there's policy and planning projects that would be implemented by development services. So in combination, that is the work of implementation. And of course, in order to achieve those projects, there would be some financing and budgeting that would need to be adopted by council in order to facilitate the implementation of various projects. We'll get into that in more detail in a moment. And then, of course, the core action is to implement those greenhouse gas reduction measures. There would require a significant amount of public participation to actually realize the full effect of the emissions reductions in the climate action plan. This is a community-wide plan. It measures community-wide greenhouse gas reductions. So a large part of the effort would be to encourage and facilitate and incentivize residents and businesses to also do their part and reduce emissions within their buildings and in their driving patterns and habits and things as well. And then lastly, the monitoring and updates. So as I mentioned, the city and staff would monitor annually the progress of implementing the climate action plan. We currently do that now. We complete an annual monitoring plan every year. And then updates, in terms of updates, we would do an update of the inventory every 2 years, and the CAP is still recommending that overall updates of the entire plan are conducted every 5 years. And with that, I'll hand it over to Scott Anders to go over the cost analysis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Scott Anders, Executive Director of the Energy Policy Initiative Center, and I'm going to go over I'm going to do an overview of the cost analysis completed for the CAP update. This slide presents the framework, the overall framework we used to kind of conduct this analysis. The cost analysis has 2 parts. First part is an implementation cost analysis. This asks the question, what is the cost to the city of Encinitas to implement CAP measures? Results are presented in dollars. The benefit cost analysis also has 2 parts. One looks at the cost effectiveness of measures, and this answers the question, how cost effective are CAP measures at reducing greenhouse gases? And results there are measured in net present value per metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent reduced, as Crystal and Ryan have talked about earlier. And the second part of the benefit cost analysis looks at the financial impact on participants, so homes and businesses in the city of Encinitas. And this asks the question, what are the financial impacts on those who participate or are affected by measures? And results are presented in net present value, discounted payback, and benefit cost ratio. And I will note that cost analyses like these generally support implementation, including how to prioritize measures. So based on the analysis, there were several key findings of the benefit cost analysis. First, overall, CAP update measures would have an average net cost of about $245 per metric ton reduced. There was a range of results, from a net benefit of about $500 per metric ton reduced to a net cost of $22,000 per metric ton reduced. The chart on the right shows the 10 most cost-effective measures, and collectively, they would have, or on average, they would have a net cost of about $60 per metric ton reduced, and also represent about 80% of the cumulative greenhouse gas reductions that were part of the benefit cost analysis calculations. So moving on to the implementation cost analysis. This slide shows the breakdown of the total annual costs to implement the proposed cap measures and the potential sources of funding. So I'll start with the blue portion on the right. The largest part at $4.3 million annually. This represents costs that, these are costs associated with measures that are contingent on grant funding. Moving on, fee revenue represents, and awarded grants that have already been awarded represent a relatively small portion here. And so moving on to enterprise fund, that represents about $200,000 annually. And then all of those orange pieces of the pie on the left-hand side represent costs that are expected to be funded by the general fund. And so the largest portion there are measures that are associated with other city plans or policies. These measures would have happened regardless of cap adoption. The next two darker orange slices there represent the 2026 cap update costs and the 2018 cap measure costs combined. These would have an annual cost of about $600,000 per year. This slide basically shows the same information, but just in tabular format. So starting with the table on the left, focusing on that general fund row, we then break that down into general fund costs. The largest portion, as was indicated on the previous slide, are measures associated with other city plans or policies. The two green rows, those represent measures associated with the 2018 cap or the 2016 cap update. And again, those collectively represent about $600,000 per year for cap implementation. So based on both of these cost analyses, there are several recommendations to consider. First is to prioritize community measures with a net benefit. So council should consider advancing ordinance related to non-residential solar, zero-emission landscape equipment, and water conservation, as these measures save residents and businesses money. The second is to prioritize grant acquisition. We saw in that pie chart, that big blue portion represents over 50% of the proposed 2026 cap implementation costs, and those are contingent on grant funds. Third is for the council to consider power purchase agreements for municipal solar and battery projects. There is no upfront capital cost, and you start getting immediate benefits through lower electric bills. Finally, there's a recommendation to continue adopting local reach codes. The development and the implementation costs to develop and adopt these reach codes are relatively small, and they can effectively reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the residential commercial sector. So I will turn it back over to you, Crystal. Or?
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say that wraps up our presentation, and we are all available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, and do we have any questions of clarification?
Yes.
Luke.
Okay. Quick question. Just I know you guys answered for me, but for the public, when do we and how do we measure carbon? The metric ton carbon output? Like, is there a weather, we measure it daily, or there's weather stations? How do we measure carbon offset?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we don't have weather meters or carbon meters out in the community, this is a modeled exercise. And so we used a protocol that was established by SANDAG, the San Diego Association of Governments, that has a protocol for how you do climate action planning, and they actually have a set protocol for how you do a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for a city. And it's all based on data that's been collected and then is conglomerated into the different sectors and partitioned out for our particular city to get a total annual result for whatever particular year you're looking at doing an inventory. And then the forecasting is also done, again, based on SANDAG protocol for modeling emissions. And that's a set model that all cities in the region that have climate action plans use.
So it's a big subtraction off of a bigger model. So the bigger model would be a national or international model, correct? On some level,
Yeah,
either
that are
temperature,
similar.
global temperature, whatever it is, or
Yeah.
that's what they're using. So we don't actually see a footprint. And just for everybody's edification, is that we don't see an actual change. We're not making a change. We're actually seeing a math problem done off of what current status is and what we project.
Yes.
It may not, or it may measure up depending on what other communities do, and again, locally and then nationally, internationally as well.
Yeah, a
So,
math problem
okay.
based on data and research. Yep.
Copy. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Scott Anders had a question for you on I really appreciate you pulling out the grant subsidy and talking about that. Of course, I want to know quantitatively. So on like the MAP ATP CET1, was there an assumption built into that of how much might be subsidized, how much it might be subsidized by grants? Or do you know, how can I get, I'm assuming the benefit cost analysis that you're giving us in that table includes the grant offsetting and therefore lowering the benefit cost. Is that true?
I don't know if you know about the specific.
Yeah, I can answer that. So yes, the numbers are in the cost analysis, and we do separate out what we expect to get in terms of the grants to fund capital improvement projects like bike and ped projects, and then and we base this on historical funding that we've seen in previous budgets and what we do expect to continue into the future.
And is it possible maybe in the future to get the with grant, without grant number there? I think that would be very helpful. And then I think another column that would show the costs to the city. I know that's the ICA, and that would be good to see there. So
Okay.
cool.
Just a quick note on the subsidy. We generally did not include subsidies, mainly given the uncertainty around the source of subsidies. And so there have been a lot of tax credits and other things that have gone away. And so if we did this 5 years ago or 3 years ago, it would have been a very different analysis. But just given the uncertainty, we thought it was prudent and conservative to leave those out. And we did include a section that showed what would happen if, we didn't include specific subsidies, but just said, if the total cost was reduced by 10%, 15%, 20%, just to give you a ballpark of what that might do to the overall result.
But I could see where we've had a lot of those ATP, MAP projects have been substantially funded by grants, and therefore I want to understand, am I seeing just a fraction of the benefit cost, or am I seeing, did you assume 20%? Historically, we get 80%. I just need to know that in the future to help me understand each of these items, how they weigh in.
So
The council, Deputy Mayor O'Hara was asking, what are we showing here? Let me take a shot at it, and you tell me if I'm right. We're showing the benefit cost analysis, which is the total cost to the economy, basically, but it has been subtracted out the grant assumption. So it actually is the cost, if you will, is lower than it would have been if no grant was there.
So you're mixing a little bit the benefit cost analysis and the implementation cost analysis. So let me just clarify that the implementation cost analysis is the implementation the cost that it would cost the city directly to implement the measures.
Yeah.
The benefit cost analysis looks at the entire community's cost, so not just the city, but the participants. So In some cases, we do, where it is relevant, we do incorporate the grants that we anticipate. But conservatively, we don't always do that because we didn't want to assume that we would always have, that there's a guarantee that we would get whatever particular grant.
So in this case, the right column, it says cost effectiveness. I think, Ryan, you said that's the benefit cost analysis.
Correct.
Per
Yeah.
equivalent
Yeah,
metric
so that
ton.
typically would not have
answer
a
your question?
relevance to
Okay,
whether
well,
or not we
you
got
can
a
ask when
grant.
you're up. Let's see, and then just similar type of assumptions. I'm trying to understand the assumptions. Well, on CET 5 on page 12, that's the idling of traffic, and we're projecting it all the way out to 2040. What kind of percentage of vehicles are we assuming become non-carbon, electric vehicles, and or hybrids that turn off when they're idling? And by 2040, I would expect that number to be very sizable, in which case, what did you assume here? Half, all, none? I mean, if it was all, you'd go to no savings, right?
No greenhouse gas reductions.
Well, I would say that, yeah, you would go to no cost and no greenhouse gas reduction if 100% of the cars by 2040,
That's
if we're
correct.
supposedly outlawing vehicles, cars, I should say, in 2035, 2040 is going to be hopefully somewhere in that high percentage of non-carbon producing, non-greenhouse gas producing vehicles.
Yes,
So
we do take into account the increasing or the decreasing
do.
emissions from vehicles due to electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, other things. The exact percentage, I don't know. Do you know off the top of your head? About 80% clean vehicles
By 2040?
Yeah, 2045.
Okay. So the effectiveness of those kind of impacts, structural impacts on roads, actually is going to be declining as we get to hopefully a carbon-free vehicle base. Granted, that's a wish, but so far the market's probably doing a better job than anybody else at getting there. So,
Yeah,
okay.
and you're exactly right, and that was factored into that analysis.
Good. Okay, great. That's my questions. I've got Deputy Mayor O'Hara.
Couple of quick questions. You mentioned the CEQA benefits. Can you be more specific on the CEQA benefits? How do they benefit the residents, quality of life and finances?
The CEQA benefits,
Yep.
I can outline the environmental impacts that CEQA identified. And so there was a negative declaration that was determined for the 2018 Climate Action Plan. So that means that there was determined to be no environmental impact as a result of the city's climate action plan. And so with the draft 2026 cap, it is anticipated that as it's currently proposed, we would be able to do a simple addendum to the negative declaration and be able to similarly declare that there is no environmental impact to the resident, to the community, to the no impact to the environment, excuse me.
So it's just, we're purely using the metric of environmental impact. We're not looking at whether it changes their quality of life or finances, other than environmental.
Right, so for CEQA, you're strictly looking at environmental impact. There's not, you don't look at financials and you don't look at quality of life. It's strictly, there are categories, like there's, yeah.
Significant effects is the primary tool that's used for CEQA review.
Yep, perfect. Okay, and then the layering of the 3.3, that number kind of caught me aghast. Is that folded into, and maybe this is a message, question for the city manager as well, I assume that's all folded and layered into other, like purchasing a vehicle that we need, and we replace it with electric vehicle or something like that. That's along those
Yeah.
lines, it's folded into that, it's not a 3.3.
Yeah, so that is, I can clarify that the largest portion of that $3.2 million is bike and pedestrian projects. And so typically, what we've seen historically be allocated by council for bike and pedestrian projects in our capital improvement program is on average around $3.2 it's just under 3.3 million. There's a couple other small projects in there, but for the most part, that's bike and pedestrian infrastructure.
Okay, and that pulls in all bike and pedestrian. So, for example, we just put a stop sign in on Saxon. I would assume it doesn't include that, right?
That would probably be too insubstantial to have been incorporated. We looked at the major projects, so things like, long roadway improvements, streetscape, roundabouts, those sorts of things.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate the explanation. Last question, power purchase agreements, who are they generally with? And what agencies throughout the state are they generally with?
Yeah, so the power purchase agreements are typically with a third-party vendor that would be implementing and managing the solar and battery system for the city. So there's many vendors out there that do that. They're third-party energy providers that develop these projects. Energy services companies, sometimes they're called. And so the measure there would recommend that the city seek such a vendor. We would do that typically with our regular procurement process, seek one that bids for the project and is reputable, and then that would be the vendor that we would go with for the PPA.
And so those are generally higher than our average energy costs, correct?
So the structure there is that you would enter into an agreement with them so that they would install the equipment and guarantee a cost savings on your energy bill over time. And so it would be a cost savings.
And is our, what is it, San Diego Power? San Diego Community Power, is that considered a power purchase agreement?
It is, no, I wouldn't. They're a community choice aggregator, and so they are a utility scale aggregator that puts electricity on the grid, and their goal is to put renewable energy sources on the grid, but they wouldn't necessarily be a vendor that we would go out to for a PPA.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification on between the differences of the two. It's actually really helpful. I think as far as questions of clarification, that's what I have for the moment, and thank you.
Okay, and I think we have public speakers.
Yes, we have 14.
14, holy cow. We're not gonna, well, I want to get the public in here. Let's just do it, yeah.
Okay. First
We
three.
have to run a little over, we'll run a little over. Yeah, if whatever you can do to speak quickly.
Okay. First three speak.
And if the next speaker can move up, or next two speakers can move up to the front row.
First three speakers: Cesar Javier, followed by Jim Wong, and then Dennis Luget.
Thank you, Uncle Sam. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, councilors of this city, brothers and sisters. We are here not to compete, but rather to work together. We have something to share. For example, I cannot speak of all these angular programs. I would like to say congratulations. You are hired with the APCD governing. The presentation is, to us, excellent. You mentioned about water conservation particularly. To us, that is the most important. Of course, next to clean air. And perhaps the city of Encinitas may venture for the first among cities to incorporate in the building code a cistern to collect this precious rainwater, and or to put some dam on tributaries where you could pump it back to higher elevation for future use. Number two, or number three, I mentioned about sheltering, that cistern type on water conservation. On clean air, I think APCD has some contribution, particularly on their Code Rule 11, exempting 20 industrial and manufacturing businesses, which are emitting pollutions or toxic gases, if I may say that way. APCD was originally with the County of San Diego, overseeing, ensuring that clean air is for all, rich and poor. And when Mayor Gloria then was an assemblyman, took it from the county, and now it is independent. But the salary of the employees come from the county. I am saying this because they are supposed to be the one orchestrating all this. In fact, they have tasked 5 tasks, including climate change and environmental justice, when the implementation of CEQA was being crafted and implemented. So I would like to end up, let us work together because this is a great strategy. We have to include everyone, particularly our community, for
Thank
health
you.
and safety. We can never.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jim Wong, Cardiff. First of all, I want to thank Christo and Ryan and their staff and also Scott Anders Epic for producing an outstanding report. I also want to thank the mayor and council for this special meeting to discuss the city's plans for a very important environmental concern. So the Climate Action Plan presents a lot of measures, all of which requires a decision on whether to go ahead with them. And as you know, all decisions require a kind of cost-benefit analysis, and choose one's best ratio. So the cost analysis does compute BCRs, benefit cost ratios, for each of the measures. But that says that the cost is dollars, no dispute there. I don't know much about accounting and NPVs, but it says the benefits are measured in metric tons. But benefits are a lot more in metric tons, because there's a lot of benefits that can't easily be measured in metric tons, such as public safety and health, or social equity. So those are co-benefits, and they're mentioned frequently throughout the CAP. Now, the cost analysis seems to ignore those. It admits it ignores them. And I don't think that's quite right, because in many cases, the co-benefits are even more important than the metric tons, such as public safety and health are important, social equity as well. So I'm afraid that having the cost analysis reducing the value of the measures down to a single number, a single convenient number, is too easy to overemphasize. And I want to caution you to not do that. Please don't do that, because reducing your decision to one number, which does not represent the true ratio of the cost and benefit, is not a good decision process. Thank you.
I'm Dennis Leger. I thought those were great questions that the board asked. I'd like to read something for me here. I did a quick search on my computer, and I asked, is the Earth greening? And the first item that popped up was this one here, and I'd like to read a little bit for you. By the way, it's a report dated April 2016, which happens to be the same base year as the CO2 stuff. From a quarter to half of the Earth's vegetated lands has shown significant greening over the last 35 years, largely due to rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, according to a new study published in the journal Nature Climate Change on April 25th. An international team of 32 authors and 24 institutions in 8 countries led the effort, which involved using satellite data from NASA's Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectrometer and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's Advanced Very High Resolution Radiometer instruments to help determine the leaf area index, or amount of leaf cover over the planet's vegetated regions. The greening represents an increase in leaves on plants and trees equivalent in area to 2 times the continental United States. I wish you could see this map, but the green means it's greening some of it as much as 50%. Green leaves use energy from sunlight through photosynthesis to chemically combine carbon dioxide drawn in from the air with water and nutrients tapped from the ground to produce sugars, which are the main source of food, fiber, and fuel for life on Earth. Studies have shown that increased concentrations of carbon dioxide increase photosynthesis, spurring plant growth. It then goes on to say that that isn't the only reason. It says results showed that carbon dioxide fertilized explains 70% of the greening effect, and I won't read the rest because I know time is very limited. Basically, warming means increased area for plants in non-ice covered areas, and okay. About 85% of the Earth's ice-free lands is covered by vegetation. I'd like to read more, but I'm limited on time. So I think this report is very thorough. I just wonder why we're spending anywhere from $12 to $20 million to eliminate carbon dioxide that is greening the Earth. I don't understand it. I got a lot more, but sorry, folks.
Thank you.
Next 3 speakers, Katie Kramer, followed by JP Bruner, and then Ron Medak.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. Thank you so much for your attention to this important matter and for all of your work on the CAP, Crystal and associated staff. I'm Katie Kramer. I'm a commissioner on the Environmental Commission, and as a member of the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee on the Environmental Commission, I've been actively involved in the various steps of the CAP update process. This involvement includes attending public workshops. Crystal mentioned there were several public workshops to get input from the community all along this process. I provided input on a range of additional measures that will allow us to meet our city's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals and targets. And I also provided feedback on the benefit cost analysis that you were presented with today when that was presented to the Environmental Commission during our last meeting. And in my capacity as a commissioner, and also more kind of personally, my day job is I'm a coral reef scientist, and I'm helping to document the worldwide die-off of reefs due to climate change. I wanted to take a minute to share my thoughts on the CAP update and the benefit cost analysis in particular. So first, again, I want to commend Crystal and all the other city staff that have worked on the CAP update. This has been a monumental multi-year process. I've been on the commission for 6 years. We've been working on this CAP update for that entire time. It's scientifically rigorous, transparent, and prioritized community input at every stage. Second, as the council digests the results of this really meaty, substantive benefit cost analysis, I'd like to reiterate for you that this analysis was by design very limited in scope to only consider the financial costs and benefits of various greenhouse gas reduction measures. It does not include the vast social and environmental costs of greenhouse gas emissions. There's a huge cost to continuing to emit greenhouse gas emissions. That wasn't included in the scope of this analysis, and this analysis does not consider the various co-benefits of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as we've kind of been touching on today. So just want to really make that clear. Third, all of the measures outlined in the CAP update and considered in the benefit cost analysis are required to reach our stated greenhouse gas reduction targets and goals. So given all of this, the results of the benefit cost analysis could be used to prioritize the order in which the suggested new measures in the update could be implemented, but I don't want this study to be misinterpreted as suggesting that any existing or proposed measures be eliminated. So to conclude, we have an award-winning CAP that will allow us to do our part in combating the climate crisis and safeguarding our local environment. The CAP update presented tonight is the result of rigorous scientific analyses, substantial community input, and significant city resources, including the benefit cost analysis, which cost a significant amount of money. So I urge you just to approve the CAP update. Thank you.
And if the next speaker could come up to the front, come on up, Ron.
All right. Afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is JP, and I too am on the subcommittee, the CAP subcommittee for the Environmental Commission. I take great pride in being part of a community that continues to lead in this space, and I'm very grateful to those individuals who put in the long hours to make this happen. So thank you to Crystal, Ryan, and team for all that hard work. On the topic of tonight, I'll be very brief and just reiterate what's already been said a few times. This analysis is simply one tool to help us implement the CAP effectively and efficiently. It should not be confused that this information points us to which strategies should be kept in the CAP or which should be left out. All of these measures are valid and all necessary to hit our goals. Please also consider the known emissions that we've already talked about, that this analysis does not include, on top of the multiple added benefits to many of these measures. We're also excluding the price of inaction. So failure to act, adopt, and mitigate climate impacts also will always be increasingly more costly. So the longer we wait, the more we pay, basically. So after much delay, let's please move forward in adopting this draft CAP as is and get to work on implementing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, Ron Meddock, Levenheim. I will have good news. We've already accomplished the 2045 metric. We need do nothing. The international committee responsible for the official scenario that fed into climate modeling, that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change responsible for all of this, has published in April the next generation of climate scenarios. And the big news is the new framework has eliminated the most extreme scenarios, specifically RCP 8.5, SSP 5 to 8.5, and SSP 3 to 7.0 that has dominated climate research for the past several decades. RCP is representative concentration pathway. SSP is shared socioeconomic pathway, for those of you who don't know. There are two models used to support the argument that greenhouse gases are causing a worldwide catastrophe. That is to say, things like a 6-foot change in sea levels upwards, which I heard from some of the staff when I was in Encinitas Academy, caused by extreme temperatures of up to 7 degrees centigrade. That's an increase. That has now been declared implausible by the same people that originally said that was what we should expect. And this committee declares that the medium scenarios, plus 3.5 degrees centigrade increase by 2,100, are the probable. But of course, they can also go down as time goes on. So this is not because of a positive change, as it will be spun as a result of wind and solar policy. It is because the assumptions used in the original modeling process, extreme high coal burning and conversion of coal to liquids, did not occur as predicted. It was garbage in and garbage out. In other words, this committee and the IPCC had to adjust to the real world, which did not match their widely advertised predictions. Encinitas cannot change or alter in any meaningful way this issue. All of this so-called science is suspect. We should not participate or spend taxpayer dollars to the extent that Sacramento allows our hands to be unshackled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next three speakers, Scott Campbell, followed by Ann Feeney, and then Judy Brofine with a time donation from Mark O'Connor, who is present.
Okay, good evening, council, and all the commissioners and staff. It's wonderful that the commissioners are so involved. I talked about perspective. I'm going to offer a few perspectives on this. First off, I can't believe it took over an hour for the IPCC to even get mentioned. If the product requirements change drastically, the product has to change. If we have a flawed premise, we have to change the conclusions. We heard about some of the stuff here. One of the perspectives was cost. $600,000 a year. That's more than our road budget. That's more than we're spending on drains. That's just some perspective there. This is about climate. Will these things have any measurable change in the climate? We need to ask that. Is this just feel good? Is this moral framing and stuff like that? I don't have enough time to keep going. I talked about the science. The science has changed. We must change. One of the things that was mentioned was this is a jobs creation. And that's an unfortunate side effect of this, because the state said that we have to have a housing element. The housing element said we have to have a report. The report said we had to have a declaration. The declaration said we had to do action, and we have to have higher bureaucracy and consultants. This is a circular argument here, once again, based on a flawed premise. My ask is that because of state laws, that we actually just reduce these things down to what the state requires at a bare minimum and do nothing less until this all gets settled out. My main takeaway from this whole process is that global or greenhouse gases is not an effective measurement. You know, we've heard people talk about tree coverage, and clearly those are very desirable. You can't measure that on GHG. So there's got to be more metrics involved, and maybe greenhouse gas is not even relevant. We don't know this. We could talk in perspective. We could talk about this in relation to the budget. You know, how much is left in the budget? And we're being asked to spend another $600,000 per year for 20 years. And then what? And then what happens after 20 years? It just goes away for free? No, it's going to keep on going. So these are just things to think about when you make your decision tonight. Remember, my ask is to reduce this down to state minimum requirements.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Feeney. I want to applaud Crystal Nahara and her team for doing a really excellent draft cap that she's got, and now this cost-benefit analysis. With regard to the cost-benefit analysis, which is the topic for today, I want to reiterate what a few people have said, that there's many co-benefits that don't have any monetary value with it, public health and the environment. So we need to consider those and not just the dollar amounts of the cost-benefit analysis. Also, as Crystal presented, of the total estimated cost of all the cap, only a very small fraction, 7%, are costs that are uniquely associated with the cap. The rest are things that the city is already doing or will get grant funding for. And also, many of the measures in the cap will actually save money for residents and or businesses. I also would like to say, in response to some of the public comments, as a scientist, I can clearly say that climate change has increased effects right now. We have increased wildfires, we have increased severe weather, sea level rise, increased heat and heat-related public health concerns. So the scientific evidence is overwhelming that climate change is real, and it's due to greenhouse gas emissions, primarily from the burning of fossil fuels. And lowering the greenhouse gas emissions is what the cap addresses, and therefore this will benefit everybody. I would encourage the city to move forward on many of the measures in the building decarbonization section. Buildings are the second highest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and council should note that huge greenhouse gas reductions would be achieved by BD5, the existing building decarbonization, and yet the cost of that measure is very minimal. It's one of the 10 most cost-effective cap measures. Also, municipal and residential solar systems are the top two measures. This is a very strong cap with many direct benefits and also co-benefits that aren't measured in this cost-benefit analysis. So I hope the council will move forward with this draft cap as presented and adopt it soon and get working on the implementing the cap.
Hi, I'm Judy Burlfine. Democracy is messy and confusing. Communication among humans is messy, confusing, and often frustrating. I believe we all want the best for our community, and we all have different ways of trying to achieve it. So I applaud the city for wanting to get a better grasp on the cost benefits involved with the Climate Action Plan. I applaud Crystal and her staff for working so hard to complete the Climate Action Plan. And I applaud EPIC for laying this all out in this monumental document. The benefit cost analysis as performed by EPIC, based on direction and agreement from our city council, has pluses and minuses. On the plus side, we can use this analysis, as many have said, to prioritize implementation of the measures. We cannot use this to pick and choose which measures to keep and which to discard. We need all of these measures to get to the finish line. On the minuses side, the BCA has multiple limitations. It does not account for the cost of doing nothing, nor for the cost of delaying action. It provides a one-dimensional answer to a three-dimensional problem. The impact of greenhouse gases is not linear. It's a systems problem where everything impacts everything else. It's a race with physics. Can we stabilize our climate before too much havoc is wreaked on we, the humans? As an example, the BCA assigns a cost of $59 per metric ton of effective CO2 for San Diego Community Power. It does that by comparing SDCP's power plans to SDG&E's. Does it account for the benefits to the entire state when a large outfit like SDCP stimulates the adoption of solar and wind power in conjunction with battery storage? Does it account for the multiplier effect of moving large groups of people off of fossil fuels? I would hate for you to misunderstand the value of each of these measures because of the cost-benefit analysis that ignores the cost of doing nothing and the cost of delaying action. The city's doing a great job addressing fire safety, working on evacuation plans and fire prevention measures. We also need to move forward and implement this climate action plan, because if you're in a boat and there's a hole in the boat, you have to bail the water and you have to patch the hole. I applaud you for bailing the water. Let's work in partnership to patch the hole. Please adopt the cap and implement all of the measures. Thank you.
Next three speakers, Dadla Ponzil, followed by Stephen Lord, and then Julie Thunder.
It's great to follow, Judy. So thank you for getting us this cost-benefit analysis, the CBA. Let me see if I can explain what it does, just to make sure everyone understands it who hasn't had time to read all 509 pages of it. I'm going to take trees as an example because I love trees. According to this analysis, a single Encinitas street tree over its 24-year life pulls about 0.84 metric tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere. It costs $28 a year to maintain, so that's $672 over its lifetime. Divide that by 0.84 tons, adjust for the time value of money, 3% discount rate, and you get that $574 per ton of CO2 that's on the right side in red, which is the net cost to us. This is how every measure in this plan is evaluated. Take the upfront and ongoing cost, subtract any direct financial savings, like lower utility bills, lower fuel costs, and then divide by the tons of CO2 avoided. That's the number in the last column. That makes trees an expensive measure. I don't know about you, but there is way more to trees than their maintenance and the CO2 removed, especially when we consider a citywide tree canopy. Here are some to think about. Shade that reduces home cooling energy use from trees. The net cooling effect of a young, healthy tree has about the cooling capacity of 5 window air conditioners. Stormwater interception. A single mature tree intercepts 1,000 to 4,000 gallons of rainfall per year, reducing the kind of stormwater runoff that's costing Encinitas millions in Leucadia.
urban heat island reduction, air quality improvement, habitat creation and support, mental and public health benefits, neighborhoods are more quiet and pleasant, property values increase. So according to the U.S. Forest Service, as opposed to our valuation of 0, the U.S. Forest Service, or rather $574 per ton, the value of an urban tree ecosystem service is $1.50 to $3 in benefits for every dollar spent on planting and maintenance. So there's a net value to trees. So the main thing about this is by ignoring the real services provided by trees, we are in effect setting the cost of a ton of CO2 at 0. This is unbelievable. Even Trump gives it a value of $1. Extreme heat, fire, storms, flooding, and droughts are not accounted for. This is a climate plan. Please consider the climate.
Steve Lloyd. I'd like to thank the team who put together the Climate Action Plan. I think it shows pretty clearly that most of the things that they would like to do, most people don't actually want to do. Most people don't want to give up their already existing gas stoves. They don't want to decarbonize their buildings. They don't want to be told they can't drive their car. They don't want to be told all these things that would have to be included as part of this program. Was not discussed. I mean, I read the study. These things are not discussed in this. We talk about incentivization. I don't want to be punished for some potential climate system. Some of the people who wrote in on the email put this better than I can. Basically, warming is far slower than predicted. CO2 is plant food, as we talked about already. There's no emergency. Let's do common sense things. If it's common sense for the city to have a purchase policy agreement and it saves CO2, well, let's do it. I mean, but let's not force people to do things that they don't want to do. Let's not have decarbonization, because decarbonization is just a code word for no natural gas. And it's not accurate anyway, because the electricity's got to come from somewhere. And if you say, well, it comes from a solar panel comes from China, and China makes them with giant coal-fired power plants. If it say, well, it's battery, the same thing. The batteries come from China too, and they also use vast amounts of coal energy to generate them. None of this inherent CO2 is included in these sort of CO2 calculations. So, you know, you're misled by this. It's just immediate CO2 reduction here in Encinitas. But if we believe the climate, it's a world climate, so CO2 in China is just as bad as CO2 here. And that's all we're really doing. And I think to Luke Schaefer's point about how are we going to measure this, well, we're not going to measure it, because we can't measure it. The effect in Encinitas of whatever we would do is like 1 part per trillion of the CO2 level of the world. It's not measurable and it's negligible. So we shouldn't do it. I'll just say one more thing. Climate policy relies on inadequate models. I've been a computer modeler for 50 years, specializing in chemical plant reactions, chemical plant design and chemical reactions. It's impossible to accurately model anything very complex without checking with the reality of life, without having physical experiments, real data. The real data that has been collected so far has shown that most of the predictions are wrong. So we have to presume, as other people said, that this modeling is inadequate, or the theories themselves are wrong. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow your orders and keep it short. Hi, Julie Fender. I have one thing to comment about I believe there were 3 suggestions that involved homeowners and the cost of housing. I only got 2 of them because the slide went too quickly. One was removing natural gas from homes and businesses. The other was adding gray water plumbing systems to houses that are being built or remodeled. Just be the guys that don't want to add to the value of housing for any reason whatsoever right now. It's not just the purchase of a house, it's the upgrade of a house. We have a lot of homes that are older and people do want to upgrade and remodel. Just say no to that section and spare that. Let that come in another, when this comes back up, I think it's in 6 years. Just preserve the cost of housing. Thank you.
Final two speakers, Russell Levan, followed by Elena Thompson with a time donation from Molly Hantlian, who is present.
To save time, yay team. Good job. Russell Levan. I just had a few comments. First of all, I think the time was years ago to start acting on this, and we have been doing that here in the city, and I applaud that. I think there are real issues that are affecting the planet. Wow, this is all off the cuff. That we need to really concentrate on. And we have the best methods at this point to try and make an analysis of what we can do to help at least my kids, I hope, and hopefully everyone else's, have a more comfortable planet to live on. And if we just disregard that and say, well, we'll start on it in a few years, I did like that comment that the longer we wait, the more we pay. It's just like everything we've done in this town. We wait for implementing certain projects because they're too expensive. The train crossings is a good example. It was only $330 million to fix Leucadia Boulevard 20 years ago. Now it'd be $1 billion. So it's not going to go down in price, and not addressing climate issues is not going to make it cheaper in the future. So I really hope we address this and implement this plan, move forward, or continue moving forward. I'll give an example of from WE1, the water conservation. It showed a benefit and a payback to the citizens of a $262 benefit cost, I believe it was. And that's for education, for conservation. And I think these are options that we could easily implement. One of them, we talked about at a water district meeting just a week ago, and that was that we're trying to swap out our meters for electronic meters so people can see how much water they use. But it's going to take 5 years, and we're going to spend $200,000 a year just replacing the same non-electronic meters. So maybe we can transfer that cost and either get those meters or use other products that are available today that could be an incentive for part of this cap that would reduce people's water use by education, and it would also alert them to if they have a water leak. They work, they're available, there's rebates from the municipal water district, and we should add to that incentive as an example of where we should move forward with the climate action plan. And I've run out of time. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Elena Thompson, Leucadia. I just got back from Switzerland, and I visited and toured through the United Nations, and I kind of feel like I'm there right now. These are definitely global issues, national issues, statewide issues, and I'm just not sure that our city has the capacity to solve these kinds of global problems. I do commend our city, and Crystal, your job as the independent contractor bringing this forward over the years. Our city's done a lot. We have the gold ribbon cap. We are doing a lot. This council has supported this all along. So, you know, can we just pump the brakes and push the pause button on doing anything more? I'm particularly concerned about the fact that our city can't afford these things. These numbers are gigantic. So, you know, you really need to look at that, as well as encumbering future city councils with these kinds of spending programs / addictions. And then finally, I would say that, you know, if if 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from vehicles, how many people here drove an electric vehicle tonight? How many people have electric kitchens? I mean, let's let the people decide how to solve their own problems. We don't need more government telling us what we can cook with in our kitchens and what kind of cars we can drive. So let's balance this tonight with not doing anything, not rushing to make any decisions. You don't have enough time anyway. And really congratulate ourselves and pat ourselves on the back for the good job we've done, but not increase the cost of doing business for Encinitas businesses with more mandates, and not make housing more expensive with some of these systems. The people want to save money, and they'll do it without government telling them how to do it. Thank you.
That concludes speakers on this item.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to deliberation and start with Councilmember Joy Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. So our CAP and our implementation plan are gold standard, and they're important to the majority of our community. We've worked hard for many years coming through the Environmental Commission, and some of the people who spoke tonight on the Environmental Commission and on past commissions were really integral to helping our city move forward, and we've had the majority behind this CAP for many years. Thank you all for that. It's our job to support the interests of our community. So with that, and in the interest of time, I'm going to give some input, and I think that's really what's going to be valuable today, is to give staff some input on what you've presented here. I want to shed a certain specific light. I'm going to look at the recommendations that you have listed on page 22, and maybe you could pull those up. So it's based on the cost analysis. City Council should prioritize implementation efforts for the following 4 strategies. So this is essentially what the recommendations are for today. What I'd like to suggest then on the first item is that even though our consultant has done great work here, we've captured what the cost is of our CAP strategies, so that's part of it. What we haven't yet done is something that I would ask our staff to do, and that is to take this information and bring it into a larger co-benefits summary, so that so we all know what we're talking about. We've had a lot of speakers talk about the co-benefits, and I think probably it's something we all know, we all can feel is tangible, that there are more benefits to some of these strategies than the one associated with the cost of the strategy per metric ton of CO2. So for example, in order for this document to be the right guidance that we need at our level here on City Council, then we need to look at the bigger picture and include what those co-benefits are. And I would like us to also identify more specifically what's buried down in the weeds of this document, the costs of where the grant funding is versus the general fund funding. I know you have aggregated that and you've put it in your pie charts, but I think I have, and I heard the mayor has many questions about let's capture accurately in a transparent way where we get grant money for different strategies and where general fund money is used. I feel like I won't be able to assess the true global benefits of these measures until that information is in front of us. So that would be my primary recommendation. And just to drill down and put a slightly finer point on it, this is a single convenient number, and we need to identify that that's what this is. It is not the big picture associated with the public benefits and the health benefits of some of these measures, the water conservation benefits of some of these measures, what the planting of trees does when it shades a house and the benefits of that to our community, what the planting of trees does as far as building habitat for the birds. There's a lot of other benefits that I'd like to see us capture. Another thing I'd like us to make more transparent, I know we have this data, we talk about the cost to the participant. And I know we've done that because we want to identify that is the cost. What we haven't done is identified who the participant is, because it's different in each measure. It could be the city. It could be an individual. And I think it could be a developer. I think us understanding what participants are and who is bearing the cost, and if it's a shared cost on each of these measures, is also important for us to use this as a useful tool. And I guess my only other recommendation that I would put forward to my colleagues to consider also is the more streamlined approach for the CEQA document would be to amend the existing CEQA document. And I would like to give staff that recommendation to follow through on. I'll yield.
And Councilmember Schaefer.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to back up real quick. I'm going to go to a bigger picture. One, when we do these reports, if we can get the presentation in the actual documents that help us for logging. And then this is kind of cleanup, but we're an hour 45 in and we're just getting to the deliberation for 15 minutes. So we need to schedule more time. But big picture is, I think there's obviously some issues on a grander scale with regards to political preferences. There's misalignment in some of the metrics that have been used, and from what we had in 2016, and I'd say a massive scare tactic towards reusable energy and all the greenhouse gas type measurements. What I will say is we don't have a physical way to measure them per our city. All of that being said, and some people saying we don't need to have the cap or the direction we're going. We just passed a budget last week for $158 million. To live on this earth, if we had to spend $600,000, should we do it? Absolutely. Is the science right? I don't know. I have to trust somebody much higher and much smarter than me that has some idea that they're trying to coordinate some kind of effort to actually make us better stewards of the earth. And what's that cost? $600,000? I don't know. Is it $400,000? Is it $1 million a year? And I can't say what our footprint would be or wouldn't be on how we're going to do it. What I will say is I think this is more of a budgeting tool for the direction we want to go towards and actually making effective changes to be better stewards of the earth. And I don't necessarily agree with all of them. I don't know that, I think that we're creating one problem where we've had rolling blackouts throughout California since the mid-90s. And it comes and goes and we go through seasons, but why are we adding all this new electric possible that we could have our own issues? And we don't have a way to get rid of some of to recycle some of the solar panels yet. We don't have an active functional way to get rid of some of the waste that we're currently creating in vehicles and in solar panels. And there will be a future growth, I'm assuming, but I guess my point that before I get into what I think the steps forward is I think that it's worth it for us to spend this much money, and over the course of years, if we adjust it to effectively become whatever the new science shows us or wherever it goes, to have a better way of measuring this. So I don't know if exactly what we're doing right now, if I agree with all of it, but I do agree that putting $600,000 towards saving the earth at our little corner of the earth is absolutely worth it. That's what I do know. And so I would support it on that alone. However, I do think we did some good stuff with the native plant model where we, as a city, adopted the native plant 50% requirement, but we also incentivized homeowners to do it on their own. And so we're doing two of the both. We actually got the organization to change their website specifically because of what we did here in our city. And it's a tribute to the whole staff, but more importantly, you guys. So I think what we do here is I look at the top 4 energy savers or metric tons of carbon, right? BD5, 38,000, right? 38,000 by 2045, 7,000 by 2030. I see reusable energy, RE1, 18,000, right? Those are the top 2. The very next one is zero waste. That's 10,000 by 2030 and 20,000 or 12,000 units by 2045. And then the very next one, which I think we can all get at, is the sequestration, right? The carbon sequestration, which is trees. And this town has rapidly gotten rid of so many trees in a very short amount of time. And so I think the one that I see, and those are the big 4 that I think that we should get behind fast, and spend more of our time there. What I'll say is the gray water, I would agree that I think that there's more people in this town that have the disposable income that if they feel that this is where they want to spend their money, I'd be much more happy. Even in the new builds. The new builds, a lot of times there's pre-purchase, and people are picking out their kitchens and their drapes and all the stuff that they want to go in the house. Why not add in $15,000, $22,000 if that's what they want to spend their money on? What I will say is I think also this community spent a lot of time, and people in this community are eco-forward as a whole. And I think there's been a lot of people that have moved their plants and their yards to drought friendly, so they've already kind of made the big shift. So them to go total drought friendly, and then they have all this gray water that ends up going back to the system anyway, and it's basically a pre-cleaning system before our water cleaning system, our recycled water, which all of us sit on these boards, 3 that that I sit on, that we do a pretty good job recycling water. So I don't think it's a very good cost-effective way to go forward and force developers when houses are already expensive. And to add that on top of the back end and top of the total dollars spent to include taxes, people are spending out their yin-yangs to get to where we got to go. And so if we want to keep incentivizing people, we've actually got to make it effective and make the economy work for us and actually get people that have dollars and cents. Not everybody does, but some in this community absolutely do. And if we can incentivize them somewhere where they can get a rebate or something like that, I think that's where we could go. But to do it all and force that is actually a very, very bad way to go. I think some of the EV charging requirements, I think they're a little stiff. We've actually saw a very significant project over off of Santa Fe get delayed significantly by 2, it was 4 total charging, but it was the 2 extra that they had to do that delayed this, and now we are lowering our income as a city because we don't have this, right? Because we didn't have this properly worded. So that's where I see is getting after the big 4, those ones I just mentioned, along with obviously the ones with the biggest bang for our buck. But to go at it complete on I think the wastewater that's pretty significant, right? It's 22,000 and 17,000 what I saw. And so I think if we come at it that way, we could have money in place that our city's used to spending, because that's the hardest part too, is once we budget a year, in 5 years, we're not gonna have the budget for it. But if it's in our budget and we have it there, it's a place to put it, and that's where, to my colleagues up here, is we need to spend something on saving this earth, period. I don't know what it is. Hopefully someday everything runs on itself and it's self-licking ice cream. But until that time, and with modern technology, I think we need to put our money where our mouth is and put some money behind this. And I don't know if 600K is the exact number, but I think it's probably close to all of us having a chance and our grandkids being able to stay on this earth longer. So I'll yield there.
Okay, I'll hop in. First of all, there are no mandates tonight. This is about reviewing the recommended actions, review the draft updated climate action plan and cost analysis, and provide input and direction to staff, as the public has been doing and as we are doing now. If we need to schedule an additional session to get extra time, I'm more than happy to do that, and we can talk about that right as we're closing if we want to schedule more input time so that staff can get that. I want to talk about what this is. This is the Climate Action Plan. It is a framework. It is a model, and it is adjustments to that model. And this is the first time that we've brought in cost benefit to it. Prior to this, we haven't been doing that, and I believe we should have been. I went back to the 2011 CAP. I would just go back to the beginning. And it serves as our guide, quote, it serves as our guiding document and outlines a course of action for community and municipal operations to reduce greenhouse gases. So it's about greenhouse gases. It's not about putting in habitat. It's not about directly solving ocean rise. It is about greenhouse gas reduction. That is what it was in 2011. In 2018, I'm reading it straight out of the document. So first of all, that's what the model is. It measures greenhouse gases, or estimates. It should say it estimates greenhouse gas. So what did I learn? What did I learn from this analysis? I think this was spot on what I was asking for. I learned solar is really, really good. It saves money. It doesn't cost us. We should have done it 2018 when we updated. We should have been adding more solar. I'll ask the rhetorical question. How many city buildings have solar on them right now? Anybody? 1. When was it put on? In 2008. Do we realize that had we put solar on the community center, on our fire stations, on any of the other buildings back in 2018, we would have paid it off by now and been able to recycle that capital. We would have been saving millions of dollars that could have been put directly towards whatever climate action plan costs we want to do it. So the purpose of this change to the climate action plan, which is a good one, is to make it even better, to get us focused on things that will actually save us money in saving greenhouse gases. The other benefits are other things we always consider and we will continue to consider. So let me go through. Gray water, I thought that was a good example. $17,000 per metric ton equivalent offset. That's incredibly expensive to do it. And so I think there are some things that should come off this list. They may be funded elsewhere, they may be incentivized elsewhere, but for a greenhouse gas, how do you increase it? The amount of that gray water would save was down in the single digits of metric tons over the target date out to what, 2045 or whatever. Yeah, but there were others that were in the 4,000, 3 orders of magnitude variation between the benefit, three orders of magnitude in the cost. So one of the things I'd like to see in the future for this document is probably on a log scale, log, XY scale. I always want to look at what programs give me the highest cost savings for the highest sequestered or reduction in metric tons, and what gives us the lowest for the highest cost. And I'm going to focus up here. That's the way I look at business that way. I look at everything that way. This, I probably can get away without even doing. It's in the rounding error, the big ones up here, because it's 3 orders of magnitude in cost and 3 orders of magnitude in benefit. And so to take out a project that is probably just distracting people right now, and have them focus more on where we're going to get the big benefit to the greenhouse gas reduction. And if you can put up the chart of the if we do nothing city, I think that shows you not the plot. And I'm going to make my point on here, because this shows the gap the city needs to make up. Some of these projects don't even make up the thickness of the line at the bottom, the black line at the bottom. The dot is bigger than their effect. And so it's not really going to make us make or break. But others are 3,000. If you look up there, we're talking 400,000 is our total greenhouse gas. You have to be in the thousands to be affecting those lines on here, and that's what we need to do. If we're going to make up the lower part, I think the bottom 2 colors. I think the plot in the document, or sorry, the plot you had in your presentation, didn't it have the gray area on it, the slashed? Basically, the gray area was the segment that there you go. The gray area between the target and the red is what we have to make up in the climate action plan, in a nutshell. And so we need to move, we need to have enough big programs in there to make it up. And the little ones are just going to be down in the noise. So that's why I'm doing this. So I really appreciate this. I think this has helped tell me which projects, and there are other projects. I would actually like to also have the analysis from the projects we eliminated to understand whether any of those move the knob too, whether they can move the dial, so to speak. Another recommendation, I agree with Councilmember Lyons on the CEQA MMD. I believe it is an amended minimum mitigated negative debt. And I already talked about the post, so and can you post this presentation on the public website and send it to the council so we have it? Because I like the slides too. With that, I think I've made my point at the big picture, and I think we can talk at the end here whether we want to do another meeting, and I will yield to Councilmember San Antonio.
I'll be brief. I agree with a lot of the mayor had to say about some of these programs. And I forgot who said it, but this, thank you, by the way. I don't want to skip over saying that. I know we're gold standard. I know this is a lot of work. Clearly, it's a lot of science and a lot of data collection and putting this all together. So I appreciate what this document has put the document in front of us. I think that the hard part for me, not that this is not beneficial for what we need. I believe it is a great budgeting tool to see where the dollars are. You know, I watch a lot of documentaries. I'm not saying that's whether they're all true or not, but I think when I watch these documentaries and I see what we do here in the United States, what we're trying to do here in Encinitas, and then you see what they're doing in China or India or, you know, these countries that are just plumes of whatever going into the sky, into the earth, into the oceans. And I think when I hear Councilmember Schaefer talk about, you know, do our little part in this corner of the earth, but it is a global issue. Still, the money to me is still a lot. Considering, you know, if this is truly is something that's global, I know we're trying to do our part here in Encinitas, in the United States, in California. It's like, for me, it just becomes, are we really putting money towards something that is going to affect not just our small part, but the world? And I feel like every time I see one of these documentaries with all that, you know, all those chemicals going into every part of the earth, to me, I just want to be sure that these dollars are being spent the right way. Not that I don't think that we shouldn't do anything, because doing nothing that's not right either. But the dollars, again, makes a difference to me. And I think that what the mayor said was totally 100% spot on with looking at what these performance metrics are, because some of these definitely have a cost to benefit ratio, and I see it. All right, that makes a lot of sense. I don't get off my soapbox. I just wanted, the whole global thing for me is a huge deal. And our neighbor down in Mexico can't even take care of, you know, their sewage coming into the United States. So just so many things for me start to like meld into one, and we're trying to do our best. We're trying to do things here as best we can, but it seems that nobody else is helping what we're trying to do. So I'll yield.
Okay, and Deputy Mayor O'Hara.
Okay. First up, thank you to everyone for your hard work. Thanks for coming back with what we asked for. I know it was not easy to lift for anybody, and it was appreciated. What can you say about a CAP? You know, you look at what's on a CAP, and you realize part of the reason they want it is they want to drive vehicle miles traveled to encourage building. And then at the same time, we're talking about what we're all concerned with, which is affordability of living. And you look at this document and it just drives it up. It's like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth in a document like this, which is really hard. And I think we do that a lot and not by choice sometimes. What I would really have preferred, and I think we'd get better buy-in in the community, is if we had a comprehensive environmental plan. Comprehensive environmental plan would be biodiversity, habitat protection, air quality pollution, wetland and riparian management. I mean, this barely touches on, I think, what most of us could do to help our streams and management of our streams and clean water get into the ocean. Stormwater, watershed management, noise and light pollution. You know, we don't talk about dark skies in here and the effect that has on pollution. Climate resilient infrastructure, sustainable land use and urban form, community-based environmental education and engagement, circular economy with recycling, things like that. Indigenous, you know, looking at environmental stewardship. You know, the climate action program is great, but there's a lot of requirements in this document, and there's a lot of expense in this document. People get buy-in when they want to participate. And when you have an environmental plan, you get participation. And a lot of these boxes automatically get checked. And and not only do we do two things, we come at it two ways. We clean up the environment, which we all want. I heard somebody talk about saving the reefs. That's not in here. Saving the reefs is going to be going out there and fixing our reefs right offshore. We get buy-in from that. We can get every surfer in Encinitas to buy into fix the water, fix the reefs. Bam, we're helping with carbon sequestration, all the things we want to do. We can look at upcycling things more in the city than we do. We have the resources to do that, and yet we don't. We're talking about making more and then requiring more. So I really just wish we had a environmental plan for the city, because I think people, when they buy into something and they have the opportunity to participate, I can't afford to participate in some of this, to be honest myself. And so when you have the opportunity to participate, you become invested. When you become invested, you want success. I think everybody in the city, everybody up here wants success too. So I when I look at a cap, I get just ultimately, it just seems like it's so pointed in one direction, and as if there's no other way to get there, and I don't believe that. And it's a great document. It's got a lot of really helpful things on it, a lot of really great ideas. But I look at things like install public electric vehicle charging stations, right? That's on here. Who's paying for it? Where's the budget in that of the $150 million we just passed, right? Meanwhile, true story. I'm getting my hair cut at Raul's. Poor Raul, I'm the best. This is the best he can do with me, but it is what it is. But I'm sitting there and we're talking. Guy sitting next to me says, "Hey, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm the deputy mayor of Encinitas." That's why Raul's giving me a hard time. And he says, "Oh man, I have a company that builds solar chargers for cars and rechargers for cars, electric vehicles. And we're working with Del Mar. We're working with Solana Beach. We're doing all this." That's the private sector. Private sector, if we bring them in, if we invite them in, if we make the opportunity there, we'll do a lot of this without us forcing them, because they see the market to make the money on it. So when we say we're going to force something or we're going to install it, there's a lot of unnecessary steps in there. I'm going to take a step back on here. Item ZE1, limit use of gas-powered leaf blowers, and go to gray water matter. We'll touch on both of these. Let's step back to something that just was at Coastal Commission and somehow made it through Coastal Commission. Quill Meadows, right? Quill Meadows was just approved. We're gonna limit the use of gas-powered leaf blowers, which is somewhat regressive to our population that does a lot of the work that uses gas leaf blowers. Force them to buy new products, which they're gonna have to charge multiple times a day, which means they can't work as much. Keeps them from creating as much money and really stifles their growth economically. Yet when we build Quill Meadows, so in that measure will help us get rid of 24 cars a year. 24. Last time I checked, Quill Meadows is going to park 800, right? So gray water. Quill Meadows is supposed to be addressing cleaner water and getting water there, right? Gray water pumping. Well, that's going to make the cost of living go up for these people. So these units, for these affordable units we have coming up, are going to be less affordable. And then everyone out here who has a child that wants to come back here and live here is going to be challenged by the expense that adds. I find it ironic, lastly, with Quill Meadows, areas like Quill Meadows, that we're spending time on a non-environmental program that we can get people behind and talking about forcing people to do something, yet nowhere on here does it talk about eating up open space with development where we have carbon scrubbing occurring naturally already and fighting that. And I'm just stumped. I don't know where to go with it. I think we're so focused, and I know it's a politically driven document. It's driven by political purpose when it came together. All these caps are only 48% of the cities in California have a cap. Only 41% of those have gone so far as to implement it in a way that California checks off on and says that you're doing the full amount, which tells me there's probably a better way to do this than through a cap. Otherwise, everyone would do this. So I think it's great work. I really love what's on here. I agree with Councilmember Schaefer. I agree with Councilmember Lyons. I think moving forward on and doing everything we can for the environment to leave this place as great stewards, better than it is, and even in some cases the opportunity to improve it, which some of these means we could do that with aren't here, should be there. But I really wish, instead of a cap, we were really looking at an environmental plan that our residents can actually participate in without it costing them every time they turn it back to be environmentally friendly. I had a couple other pieces on here I just wanted to touch on. I had a question on the city-owned landscape drought-tolerant or native species one, where it says $22,188. Is that for the whole city? Because our landscape budget is like $1 million.
That's per metric ton equivalent offset.
So how much is that for the whole city then?
But
I know, it's $150,000, but I have a hard time believing that because I don't think it's a measurable metric is where I'm going with this. So when we get into this, some of the data is faulty in this. Again, it gets a little bit tricky. And then, and I love the push for solar. I think that's a great push. I don't think we can force it on our residents, but I think any way we can help make it, whether it's through education or whether it's through applying them all to the cities. And I think we should look at our parks, get more solar in there to power our parks. I think that rated it as the highest, and I'd love to see that go through. I'm glad we're taking the step forward. I'm glad we're working on a document that addresses the importance of the environment. I don't ever want to see that fall off the planet. I would really like to see an environmental plan, though, because I just feel like this is hard for me as a resident, not as a counselor, but as a resident to think I could do this and really affect the world. It's too big of an elephant to take a bite of, one bite at a time. I'll kind of rest on that. Thank you.
Okay. I'll be very quick. I got two things. Number one is we have the general plan, the comprehensive general plan. And a lot of the environmental components we're talking about here, whether it's maintaining archaeological sites, habitat, that's all spread throughout our general plan. One of the things, and I've talked to several of the environmental commission about this, is I think that this city of all cities should have an environmental element. The general plan is comprised of multiple elements, be it the traffic element, the land use element, the housing element, et cetera. One of the optional ones you can have is an environmental element, and that would be that comprehensive plan. I mean, we would have to pull it together and move it in there, but that is part of my long-term strategy. It's not something you're just going to go do in a day, so or even a year probably. But that I think would give you that policy, that goal and policy framework for all of the environment, not just the greenhouse gases, which is what the cap addresses. The second thing is, it is 10 after. I want to see, do we want to agendize this for a future meeting, another hour of deliberation or so, 2 hours of deliberation? I want to know what the pleasure of the...
No more comment, right? No more public comment.
Mayor?
Could do it either way.
Could I make a recommendation? And this is the reason I got in the queue to speak next, is I am happy to support what's being presented here. This is one piece of information. I think we all understand it better now. I think there's probably still some questions. I've said maybe some additional information when it comes time to look at our update of our CAP. We can bring this in as one piece of information and maybe open the dialogue up more then at that time to look at the co-benefits and other things. So I guess what I'd like to say, my point of view is it might be most valuable to us when we look at updating the CAP just to bring this in as one piece of information and then drill down at that time.
So you're saying, I think, yes, at the next time. The question is, and I'll look to staff after I hear from everybody up here. I, for one, think we do need to bring it back. I think there are more probably detailed comments. I think we've asked for stuff tonight that might be worth bringing back. We could have probably a shorter staff. I think I'd still have public meeting, because in my past experience on Planning Commission, even when we continue a project, there's new information to come in whenever you publish something changed. So I would welcome that. And my recommendation is probably allow 2 hours. Maybe it doesn't take us that long, but there's probably enough detail on down in these projects. And quite frankly, I think we even suggested some new ones out here that could be possible, and maybe there are others that come up. The idea is that we want to have enough to make up that gap. That is what makes the model work and the plan work. The question is, do we need all the ones in there, or are there some that might fall off because they just cost too much and do too little? So any other feeling on scheduling another 1 to 2 hours as time allows us with our busy schedule, and especially since we are shut down for July?
Motion to approve?
I don't think we need a
No,
motion
it's
to
a
approve.
joke.
This is just
He's joking with you.
direction. Okay.
But agree, I'd say 2 hours. Are we trying to bring it back before the break?
I doubt it.
I was going to say thank you very much, Mayor, council members. I doubt it. Right now, we've got special meetings on the 17th, the 24th, and on the 10th, we have a closed session. So it looks like it would be August.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's okay. That time is okay? Check with staff.
Thanks, Mayor. I do have some thoughts. I think that the council has given us some great feedback, and the conversation is excellent. Obviously, the purpose of this CAP review is to go over it comprehensively. I personally believe that the council would be best served at an additional workshop where we focus specifically on the measures. Basically, spending the time going through the measures, each an individual one, and then discuss which one the councils agree with. There might be other items that the council would want to add into that discussion, but I think that's their best bang for your buck.
And we talked about bringing back, or not bringing, at least looking at the estimated ones that were rejected out of hand, just to make sure we agree with the rejection.
Yeah, we can certainly put that in the list as well.
Okay.
And when we do that, can we make sure that we synthesize those measures, and that one chart that the last one you showed with the value of each one with the building decarbonization and I forget the other one, but the two highest values, there should be a line there that kind of shows us where biggest bang for our buck, biggest value. And it could be a growing model where we start here for whatever year for dollar amount and then growing into as we see resident uptake or whatnot.
So I see staff nodding, which is a good sign that I think we have that information. I also wanted to suggest to the council that there is a portion of this analysis which really drives into each one of those measures, which talks about who's the beneficiary, how much, where is, all of those details that Crystal can talk about way more extensively than I can.
Yeah, kind of going to Jim's point, where there's some stuff in here that's not measured, and it'd be valuable to know that, because again, at $600,000 up versus a $158 million budget, it's of value if it does have a collaborative effort and a long-term play.
And we could go through each one of those measures for a lot of the information that we have in the document, and add more if you need as well.
Awesome, thanks, Scott.
And could we go to add a column onto that has, if there is a state requirement in that category, or none, or either way, just non-applicable, or here's the state minimum requirement, so we can kind of address where we're sitting in that and our goal, and have established basically a goal. If we want to exceed it, we want to exceed it. Here's why. If we just want to hit the minimum, here's why. If we don't, if we think we need or don't need it, just so we have that information to kind of compare.
Yeah, I think we can add that, and I also want to talk with staff about putting together the scatter plot that the mayor spoke of with regards to metric ton versus cost and where it corners out.
Yeah.
So I think with those things, that'll provide us enough information to bring back to the council. It will take, like the city manager mentioned, at least till August to put something like that together.
Okay. And Councilmember Lyons.
Yes, the one thing that I would support that I haven't heard discussed yet, since this sounds like it would be a decision-making workshop, which is a good idea, I would support this if we also identified what the co-benefits are, because then we're at the level of looking at all the other strategic planning activities and strategies that the city is attempting to do, and the co-benefits are part of that decision-making.
Quick question. How do you define co-benefits and quantify that?
I'll do that there.
Well, co-benefits might be, it just makes me happy.
Well, that would be defined. That would be defined in that moment.
Okay.
I I think daylighting where we have other strategies that we're trying to achieve the same thing is the right way to go with co-benefits. And I don't know that there's a numeric. If you're thinking numeric, I think it might be, we're trying to also do this over here and this over here, and this measure feeds in and benefits that as well.
I just want to make sure we don't lose track of what the Climate Action Plan's goal is. And you're putting in something much more like the environmental element that I talked about. So
It might give flight to the conversation going in that direction.
Yeah,
And where we go.
But I want to make sure it's not the main point of the analysis. We just have to be careful because we could try and tell them to go boil the ocean and weigh everything. But the Climate Action Plan is surgical in its description and has been. So I don't know if staff wants to, Crystal, if you want to comment on anything. You look like you want to. So I definitely want to hear from you.
I would just share that we can qualitatively estimate the co-benefits, but they are much more subjective. So we can do a very cursory level analysis of that. It would not be a deep dive, but we could give some examples of some co-benefits for each of the measures.
Huge value. And then the last thing I'd like to add is the IPPC was brought up, and the measurements they were using in 2016 and when the measurements they're using this last April. That 10-year difference in what was being said then and what that absolutely should be what starts the meeting and what we're measuring against now, just for the background of what the updated version of that. That is the measurement. That is the time that they measure. They're measuring the temperature. So if we're going to have a real conversation about it, let's talk about the real measurement that we are affecting. And if it's updated after a decade, well, we'd be remiss to not use that new updated model.
Okay, and with that, I don't have any more speakers, so we're going to adjourn and apologize for running over with the previous special meeting, but we will reconvene at what time? 6:30. So for the regular city council meeting. 7 o'clock. Hoorah.